25 years of vocational ministry is nothing to shake a stick at. There's been highs, there's been lows, there's been joys, there's been frustrations. Today we're interviewing Jared on his experience in 25 years of vocational ministry as a Christian man and what kind of impact it had on him. So Jared, you kind of grew up in a unique situation where you pastored or in a church that your dad was senior pastor of, and that's how kind of where you got your start vocationally. But let's back up and say, what first made you believe God was calling you to ministry?
Yeah, I think for me, so I grew up in the church. It's all I've ever known. Parents were very strong believers, always involved in the church. So I was at church for Wednesdays and for twice on Sundays and for Thursdays and, you know, these different programs. I was in the plays and the dramas and the kids' choirs and all that stuff. And so church was all I knew. And I came to know Christ as my Lord and Savior. It was kind of a journey. I've explained that on other episodes. So I've been a Christian for a long time. And my initial feel and pull towards ministry probably happened at my years working at the local Christian camp here in our town. It's called Camp Monadnock now. And back then it was Monadnock Bible Conference. And so at the conference, I got a job. My brother got me in. He was about a year and a half older than me. So he kind of got me roped into the maintenance crew. And I was homeschooled. John and I were homeschooled. So we did our school from like 8 to noon, got everything done. And then we were sent up to camp to work with a man named Bill. Bill Hackle, he's a legend in our minds, but the man was just, he's since passed, but he was a great man of God, and he was a jack of all trades and a master of every single one of them, in our opinion. And so it was just super cool to be able to work with him. And that's when I kind of, because from the maintenance, it branched. I did kitchen work, and then we did a lot of drama. I did a lot of leading of worship. And so couple that with our youth program with 60 plus kids, doing the same thing with the youth program, I felt like this was who I was, like what I was created to do, so to speak. So that's where I kind of first felt it.
Do you think homeschooling played a big part? What if you were in the public school? Do you think things would have been different?
There's a strong chance in that, yes. I mean, my upbringing, you know, with my mom instilling the Word of God, you know, into us, me and my siblings, you know, part of my schooling was Bible. And so I think that was probably the foundation or the footing before the foundation, if you will. That was really what the foundation was built on, was the knowledge of God's Word at a young age, and then the knowledge of service for other people and so on and so forth. So I think it's definitely a journey.
So what's been the most difficult season of your ministry life, and then how did God sustain you through it?
I think the most difficult season for me was probably when, you know, I had spent 10 years with my dad, full-time ministry with him. And that was over at Good News Bible. And for me, coming back home to my childhood church here at Jaffrey, that was hard because the church had gone through some change and some families had left. And it was almost like, you know, they were shrinking. Like we could not afford 2 full-time pastors anymore. And so with the writing on the wall, I had to resign. And so I did. That was really hard for me. It was really hard for the church. It was super hard for my dad. Yeah. My dad, it tore him apart, for lack of a better term. So that was probably the hardest season. And I think what sustained me through that was seeing how God provided and brought me back to Jaffrey Bible Church. I thought when I resigned, you know, I started looking for other full-time positions. And what had happened is Jaffrey had heard about it. And so one of my old youth leaders who's still here, who's like the head deaconess of the church, was on the search committee. You were on the search committee. So she brought my name to you guys because she heard about it. And God worked in such a way where I ended up kind of doing part-time at both churches.
For a season.
Yeah. So I came over here and I joined the youth team as the youth director and youth pastor, whatever you want to call it, and started working closely with them. And then I would go back to Good News and lead their worship on Sundays. So I was going back and forth doing these 2 different churches, and I didn't think that was going to work at all. So I was like, really? They're going to want like a guy going back and forth, like, Jaffrey's going to be okay with me not being there on Sundays. I didn't really know Pastor Foad. I didn't know the elders here, although I did know George and Paul because I grew up with them. So it was just a really hard season, but a sweet season of seeing God make those connections. And then eventually when it was time to step down full-time, Jaffrey didn't even blink an eye. You guys just hired me full-time. Yeah. So in retrospect, I came kind of kicking and screaming like, this is never going to work, and it was out of a super, super hard season.
Yeah.
And then the way it lined up with like my wife and her desire to, for us to kind of minister in the town we live in. And, we had felt kind of that awkwardness of driving 30 minutes to another town all those years. Yeah. That was hard. Yeah. Even though it was a blessing to work and study with my dad and serve with my dad, that was tough, to go 30 minutes, three towns over. It was weird. I never felt like plugged into that area. Yeah. So when we came home and my wife was already serving here, she was in the Chamber of Commerce, I think at the time. So there was just a lot of reasons why I was like, it made a lot of sense in retrospect, in hindsight.
Right.
But so that was a hard season, but that's how I would answer that. What sustained us was really seeing God actually be Jehovah Jireh, my provider, actually see that play out.
Yeah. I know we had some conversations in the past where you felt a sense of calling geographically more towards Jaffrey.
Yeah.
Was there any one thing, event, conversation that really brought that to light for you, or was it more of a general experience or something else?
I think it was a journey that my wife and I were on, is how I would answer this question, because I'm at the point now where I can look at someone and say, hey, if you're looking into pastoral ministries, do everything you can to live in that town or in that city and live close, because that's going to allow you to pastor the church there, but it's also going to allow you to plug into the community through which the church is been planted. Right. And that's huge. So my wife and I, again, all those years ministering at Wilton, we got to know people, we got to know families, and we would, but it was all about the church. I didn't really know anybody in the Wilton area, that was not part of the church. Mm. I grew up here in Jaffrey, right? I've been here 38 out of my 42 years have been spent in Jaffrey.
That's right.
So I know people. Everybody knows, the Vitello name, right? So it's, I had, my kids were in the school system. My nieces and nephews were in the school system. And so it's one of those things where my wife and I would have these conversations of, periodically through that journey of, man, we got to find a way to plug in over there. We got to find a way to, and we would try certain things and it was kind of like, yeah, but then we're not there again. And then we're there, then we're not there. So for us, it was this journey. And when we were called back to Jaffrey, there was joy in it. It was like, man, I know people here. And when I was subbing in the high school, it was like, oh, you're pastoring? Oh yeah, Jaffrey Bible Church. Like the school uses that as like an emergency. Oh, we know that's our emergency evacuation spot. Yeah, I get it. Yeah. All this stuff. So it's kind of a cool way of, connections. And so for me, we were super excited about it to come back. So that's how I would kind of answer. It wasn't like a specific moment. It was just something we felt called to.
That's awesome. Let's talk about a minute for people outside of ministry, the perception people may have. What pressures do people outside of ministry often misunderstand about being a pastor? What do they see as, oh, that's no big deal, or they see something, oh, that's a lot bigger deal than it really is? What are some of those misunderstandings?
Misunderstandings from people outside the church regarding vocational pastoral ministry? That's the question?
Yeah, essentially.
I've seen kind of both twofold misconceptions. One is, well, what exactly do you do? And it's not like sometimes that's a genuine question. Other times it's like, what do you even do? So then you got to explain how pastoral ministries is a hard job, and it's actually a 24-hour-a-day job, 7 days a week job. You get vacations, but it really is not as intense as like paramedics who got to get out and rush over. But we have hospital calls in the middle of the night. We have all these different things that people don't necessarily they wouldn't think of. So when you begin to explain it, it's like people sit there, oh, I never thought about it that way. So there's a misconception of like, so you don't do much. That's one. Yeah. And I think that's really probably the one I've seen from people. The other, that's really the only one I've experienced in my time, because the other opposite of that is people have a lot of respect for that. Like, oh, that's actually pretty cool. Yeah. Or you get the whole thing where as soon as you say that you are a pastor or you're a minister or whatever you want to call it, you get the, oh yeah, we've been meaning to get back into church. And like, I went when I was a kid, and they start justifying the fact that they're not in services, right? Which is super comical for us, but also sad, but also an opportunity to speak.
Right.
So I would say that's not really a misconception, but it's more of like
A regular conversation.
a regular conversation
Yeah.
you have from people outside of the church. So that's kind of how I would answer that question. There's also the question of misconception. Oh, actually, I thought of another one. There's a misconception that I must be some sort of moral superiority.
Super saint.
Yeah, like a saint. And like, dude, man, I struggle with the same things you struggle with.
Yeah.
Like, come on, dude. I'm a human. I'm a man. So when I say things like, yeah, because we're men. That's why we struggle with that. It's like, oh, you struggle with that too. I thought you were a pastor. I'm like, yeah, but I'm a man. So I have, those things. So yeah, that would be one I would think of on the spot.
That's
there.
a good one. Going back to the kind of your timetable and hours invested, how many hours do you think you actually, on an average week during the school year,
Yeah.
when you got the full youth ministry programs up and running, are you working and invested?
So I mean, personally, I keep it to that, 40 to 45 hours a week. I do my best to do that.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's, 50, 60 or whatever or more.
For a season.
For a season or whatnot. But I try to keep it as close because it's always going to be seasons where you're doing more.
Okay.
Because it's just like right now I'm out Tuesday nights, I'm out Wednesday nights, I'm out every other Thursday night, if not every Thursday night right now, then I'm out Friday nights. So that's not the typical. I try to do a couple nights a week and then my office hours during the day, or like tomorrow is supposed to be my full day off and I'm going to one of my students' games at 4:30, a Little League game, which I'm super pumped about. My wife loves to go, so we're going to go together. My kids will probably go. Then we have another student right at 7 o'clock at the school, going to be in a school play. She's got the lead role. We're going to go to that. That's all my job. Like that's what a person, an associate or a youth pastor, that's what we do.
Yeah.
We invest in these kids. So that's the fun part of my job. But it does add to the hours of which you put in. So, and my girls are at the age where they like that stuff and they're also friends with these kids that we're talking about. They see them in youth group and stuff. So I can go to my kids' games and see my other students there at the field.
So there's crossover. Yeah.
Because I'm serving in the same community. So what do you want me to call hours and what do you want me to call life?
Right.
That's what I would say. And so much so that when I'm standing there at the ball game and I'm having a conversation, literally can be like, this is connections with the community.
Yeah.
Right. And that's going to lead to possible, or if not, it already has led to these deeper spiritual conversations, or how can I pray for you, or those types of. So what is me just living life, and then what is me as a pastor? So that's the question I would throw back. For me, it's not about how many hours of the week I work. It's about how well I do the job, and then also how invested we are as pastors in the area that we're serving. Are you outside of your office?
Yeah.
Because if all you're doing is 40 hours in the office or 50 hours in the office, personally, I think you're failing.
Not engaged in the community.
You would never see Pastor Foe do that. You'd never see my dad do that.
Right.
I mean, my dad would go golfing every week. But, you get paid to go golfing? Heck yes, because that's where the guys were.
That's who he ministered to.
And if you look at the two or three gentlemen that were at his funeral, in fact, one of them, my dad had this thing with the guys at the church that they would golf with, where every time they would get a birdie, they'd pass along this little stuffed Woodstock bird. So if you get a birdie, they give you the birdie. And if I got a birdie on 2 holes later, they give me the birdie. So somebody went home with that little bird every time you golf. Unfortunately, it was never me. Somebody was always better than me. But anyway, at the funeral, when we went to collect my dad's remains to bring him home, there was a little birdie right there. That's how much dad meant. And somebody left that with his remains. And it's like that came from golfing as a pastor with the people in your church. You built that rapport. And so it's almost like, man, what do you call doing life with people, actually doing what you're preaching and teaching? And then how much of this for a vocational minister is actually what we're called to do as a minister too? Mm-hmm. So there's so much crossover. I don't even know how to answer that question.
Yeah, gotcha. That's fair. What about marriage life? How has your full-time ministry role affected marriage, family life, for better or worse?
For better, it keeps my family engaged in service with the church, and it keeps us with servant's heart attitudes. My wife has been serving alongside of me. She's not paid in any way by the church, and the church is not allowed to tell her what to do. I'm employed by the church. The church does not employ my wife, but she, because she loves the Lord and because she has a heart for serving others, she's been involved and puts in a lot of hours for ministry. And now my kids are doing the same thing. They're on the worship team, the youth worship team, and they're leading, and they were just asked to be part of a wedding service. They were asked to lead at camp for ministries. So it's keeping us actively engaged in service for the Lord. So that's a huge win for me, being a vocational minister. I'd say one of the challenges or one of the not so good things is because of my close relationship with my wife, I have to be super careful with how much I ask of her as far as dumping on her. Because we carry, as you know, you're an elder, you have the same, role here that I do at the church. And there's a weight to dealing with people and their messes and sin. So I got to carry my own weight, my own struggles. And, thankfully you helped me with those. But then I'm carrying a lot of other people's, and we're not supposed to carry it, but we're supposed to carry each other's burdens, like part of that.
Right.
But then I end up, going home, and there's been times, and you know this because you know me, where I just weep in my wife's arms because of the things we have to deal with here at the church.
Heartbreaking.
It's heartbreaking. Yeah. So that, and my wife has been, super strong and being able to kind of walk me through those or be there or be present or whatnot. But that's hard because I feel like now she's carrying some of the weight that I should have kept between you and I.
Yeah,
so there's a balance there of trying to learn, and I've been doing this for so long. It's like I should know better with some of it, but at the same time, that's what your wife is for. She's your helper.
Women's are so emotionally tuned. If it happens to you, that feels like it's happening to them as well. So,
So there's, I would say, for better, for worse, there's both in there.
Okay,
it's a great question though.
Yeah. Have you ever experienced burnout, discouragement, desire to quit ministry?
I wouldn't say burnout. I wouldn't say, what was the second one?
Discouragement. Have you experienced burnout, discouragement, or just the general desire to quit?
I would say the latter two. Discouragement through what happened with the church with my dad. Like we had that church. My dad took it when there was like 15 people in it, and we grew it to over, I say the Lord grew it through us, to over 200 people. We were doing 2 services. We were almost going to blow the wall out, put an addition on. And then God, allowed the circumstances that happened to happen. And all that I explained earlier, that was super discouraging for a while, for a long time. And actually my dad carried that all the way till his deathbed, right before he died. We had talked about it one final time. And I remember encouraging him, saying that, and him thanking me for saying the things that I said, which was mostly, to recap, that was just, Dad, we're only called to our faithfulness. We're not called for results. And so just through that conversation, it was like, coming full circle where I was pastoring my dad, after he had taught me the same lessons, through different times in my life.
Proof that men of many ages struggle with not perfect. Yeah.
Right. And so part of that, super discouraging.
Yeah.
But again, so that I have experienced that. People leaving, I had to that was one of the harder lessons of discouragement. Like, just people leave for weird reasons.
Yeah.
And, we don't own people. We're all one big church.
Right.
But when people don't come and talk to you and say, hey, we feel God's calling us to this other congregation, there's areas we can plug in, or hey, we feel like, this one's in our community, which we do have and we did have.
Right.
And we thanked those individuals, loved on them and cried with them and sent them on their way, still in touch with them, still love them. Some of these people are my best friends. And then we have the people that are super discouraging, where they just like, I don't like this, and I don't like that, and I don't like this, and I'm leaving. It's like, but you've been here for years. We've been doing ministry together. You've been on teams with us. Why are you leaving over this junk? Yeah. It's super discouraging. So you have to learn to deal with those. Maybe that's a further question. I don't know. And then the last one you mentioned was the desire to quit.
Yeah, tempted to get to.
I mean, if I said no, I'd be lying through my teeth. There's always times when you're doing vocational ministry where you experience and for me, wasn't burnout. It was just tired of people. I'm tired of having to find volunteers. I'm tired of whatever it may be. You just get tired, and you're like, ugh. This year was an awesome year, but I still got a little bit of that because I didn't get my week out of New England in the nice weather, So seasonal depression was like, I got to get out of here. And then you're like bored of ministry. I don't want to do this anymore. It affects your attitude. Something happens, it gets worse. So I would say absolutely. You're going to go, as any minister has gone through these seasons, if not taken long sabbaticals, right? For those very reasons or other reasons. But I would say, yeah, definitely.
Okay. What about struggles for Christian men in general? What are some struggles as a Christian man in leadership that you face that rarely get talked about publicly?
We struggle with the same things every man does. I struggle with my eyes, lust, watching things you shouldn't watch. Like, those are real things that men don't talk about.
Yeah.
And so when you ask me the tough questions, I'm like, dang, I shouldn't have watched that movie this week or whatever. You ask me the tough questions, so I got to answer. Yeah. And that for me is like, well, what do you mean? Like, it wasn't too long ago, probably 2 years ago, I think, we were, the 4 of us buddies that I grew up with, we were riding in my buddy's truck. This is way out on the West Coast, the state of Washington. we're out there and we just, it's like we were back in time in high school again. We got one of us that lives, or two of us live here in New England and New Hampshire. One lives out west and then one lives down in Pennsylvania. So the three of us were together and these questions came up just like it did back when we were in high school. What have you been struggling with lately? And I'm like, oh my God, here we go. And then the kid in the back, my buddy, he piped up and then buddy was driving piped up and then it was my turn to pipe up. And I'm like, well, I struggle with, and they're so gracious. They're like, yeah, we get it, dude. Like you're an average guy. Like you may be on a journey in pastoral vocational ministry and you're teaching other people, you're leading students, but you still have struggles that we have, or, they've conquered some areas I haven't, or
vice versa.
So you have to be able to say, you know what, we're men and we struggle. Whether that's with depression, whether that's with pornography, whether that's with discouragement, whether it's with lying or whatever it may be. Anger, it could be anger. I went through one of those seasons. You have to be able to just say, hey, look, this is what I struggle with. And I can't conquer it. So I need you to help me.
Pray for me.
Pray for me, right? Yeah. Regular check-ins and whatever. So definitely. The struggle is real.
So kind of in that context, how do you protect your Christian walk when you're constantly pouring into others spiritually? What are your boundaries, safeguards, riverbanks?
Yeah, I would say accountability is huge. We harp on it on the church a lot, and it's for a very pointed reason, this being the reason. So I would say people like yourself, I got another deacon here who's always checking in on me. So I would say definitely accountability is huge. For me, I'm married. So as a vocational married man, I protect my time with my wife. I have safeguards of, I don't counsel women alone.
Right.
I'll bring in one of my, women leaders, or I don't,
the Billy Graham rules.
Yeah. I mean, and sometimes it can kind of sound silly or whatever, but not that I'm never in a room alone with a, person that's not my wife of the opposite sex. Those times do happen, but you don't make them regular and you don't go looking for them. And so that, people are like, oh, pastor actually would. Yeah, dude, that's why you have infidelity in churches and you hear the pastor's been sleeping with the secretary because they don't have safeguards.
That's right.
So, that's why for us here at Jaffrey, we do our best to, hey, what's going on? Make sure you got the glass on your door and people can walk by, or the door's open, or you got another person in there with you, a third person. And I do youth ministry, and that's even ever more important to have a third person when you're meeting with students. So that's kind of one of the safeguards I have, or two or three of the safeguards I have for myself in those areas.
Okay. What about with your spiritual walk?
So spiritual...
habits, routines, what do you do?
I mean, for me, my personal reading and stuff, I try to do that, and I fail at it from, I go through seasons, but I try to do my personal reading like first thing. So I wake up in the morning and I roll over, usually it's my phone because I have the Bible app and I do like programs on there, or just read so I'll open my Bible app and read my chapter of the day. Right now I'm doing like the Bible in 3 years or something. So it's like a couple of chapters a week or a day. So I'm reading those and I try to do that right away to just kind of intake God's word first thing for me.
Right.
Not for the church, not for you or anybody else, but just
not for a lesson.
Not for a lesson, but just for me.
Yep. And
so that's what I try to do. And then I've got some other things that I read during the day, but for the most part, I'm trying to do a little Bible reading in the morning. And then just remembering, for me also one of the spiritual riverbanks is just remembering the calling to my wife and children comes before the ministry. So just making sure that I'm not putting the ministry before my family. That's a safeguard for me spiritually, because if I do that, right, then the job becomes what's important and not my family. Yeah. And that's a very personal spiritual issue. If you have a pastor who's all about results at the church and he's all about putting, I got to go here because this person's struggling with that. It's like, hey, I know he's really struggling, he's spiraling, but you're going to miss your daughter's ballet recital because someone can't get their act together. The guy's got to wait until the ballet recital's done. I'm sorry. Yeah. Your daughter comes first. Yeah. And that's a hard thing. Yeah. And it's one thing if you have like someone who is in dire straits, or, I remember being at one of my students' performances and with my family, and we're there, supporting, and I get a call from somebody who was spiraling. And so I say, I can be there, just give me a little bit. And so we finished up the thing, and then I took the kids home and then took off to go be with this person. So it's just, and that it sounds weird because you're asking me personal spiritual questions. Right. But keeping, if you're married, making sure your family is your priority, for me, that That's important.
First ministry is
It's your first ministry. So and I say that because prioritization is important for your spiritual life. You got God, you've got, your time with him, your relationship with him. Pastor Fowad always talks about serving out of the overflow of your relationship with God. I can't even serve my family if it's not an overflow out of my relationship with the Lord. So that happens first, then my family, then the ministry.
okay.
So for me, I've got accountability, I've got some Bible reading and prayer, and then I've got prioritization.
Right. And then guidelines of who and when you talk to people.
Exactly. Some of those
Counsel.
guidelines that
Yeah.
are, spiritually protect yourself and, physically and emotionally as well.
Yeah. What lessons have you learned about pride, humility, and dependence on God?
Ooh.
Other than what you've already talked about in regards to coming from good news to Jeffrey.
Yeah.
Is there any other?
Say that again. Pride.
Yeah. Are there any lessons you've learned in regards to pride, humility, and dependence on God?
Yeah, one of the bigger ones for pride, humility, and dependence on the Lord is that this is not Jared's church. And that's a hard one. You talk about people coming and going, leaving, trying to grow a church. What does that mean by growing? Does it mean numerically? Does it mean, stability and the people in your church are growing, spiritually closer to the Lord? Like, I think it's all of it. There's a little bit of all of it. It's both. Yeah. But understanding that we don't own the sheep. We're stewarding the sheep. Yeah. We're one big family as a church. And so one of my passions years ago that I wanted to see even as a kid was churches coming together, which a lot of us local pastors now, we're seeing a lot more of that in our area. When it's not like, hey, you have your little church over there and I got my little church over here. It's like, yeah, we do, but hey, we're having this event. You guys are welcome. Vice versa. Hey, would you promote this for us? Oh, absolutely. Hey, would you come and fill in for me? I'll be there. I'll teach you for your church on the Sunday. There's a lot of that happening right now. You're doing that right now. Yeah. And so that was one of those things that was actually a lesson that I thought I had already learned before I went into ministry. But then when I went into ministry, I was like, oh, this is how this happens. You can become kind of like, well, this is my church. And this is like, we got to grow this church. And then pride slips in. Oh, look what we've done. Look at these programs I created. And it's like, geez, you sound like Nebuchadnezzar. Look at this city that I built, you know, with all my glory. And then God's like, send you out to be with the wild beasts of the field. Oh, wow. So it's one of those, you got to be humble about it. And then when people say, hey, man, great teaching. And so I've learned instead of letting that go to your head, you say something like, yeah, man, God's so good, man. I hope you get a chance to apply this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's a good response.
Or, hey, man, to God be the glory. This is what I've been struggling with. So I feel like I had to talk about it, or something of that nature. Yeah. To keep it real and not be like, oh, I'm so glad you liked my message. What does that even mean you liked it? Yeah, exactly. Did it come across really well? Or, was it just
easy to understand?
Yeah. And I have one person who will tell me, almost every time I teach, man, I feel like you were talking directly to me. I'm like, I was talking to me, so I'm glad you got it too, but I was talking to me. So those are those tougher ones.
Yeah, I got 2 or 3 that every time will come, oh, that was great.
And then the other one you talked about, that's the pride versus the humble attitude. And then you've got the dependence on God, which, man, that was a tough one to learn. Because again, it's not my ministry, it's not my church, not my sheep. I had to learn, as my dad did, and as you and I were learning somewhat recently, even with this podcast we're doing, we're just stewarding this thing.
It's up to him to grow it.
We're not responsible for results. I mean, we can try real hard and do the best we can, which we're called to do, but the rest of it's in the Lord. We're just called to be faithful, to talk into these microphones, to talk to men about being godly men, not just good men. Right. And God will take care of the rest. Yeah. We can try to use Opus Clips and we can try to use vidIQ and AI and kind of get some ideas of what's trending and kind of talk about these things. But at the end of the day, it's what God puts on Bill and Jared's heart. Yeah. It's what we're going to talk about. We're going to put that information out there and really just rely on the Lord to do what he will do with it.
There's a flip side to that coin that I learned recently too, is that yes, God causes the growth totally, 1,000%, but he uses engaged people to do it. Yeah. And if we're not engaged, why should we expect the growth?
Very true. Yeah, it's very true.
But what about, we mentioned accountability a few times, and what has that played in your life, in ministry? What's the value there?
Well, I think the value in accountability, like I'm assuming you haven't asked me for a while, you're going to ask me soon about how I'm doing. Yeah. And I'm going to have to tell you a few things. Yeah. And that's going to be hard, right? But the value in it is that when somebody else will ask, hey, Jared, how are you doing? Doing pretty good. Regardless of if I messed up, regardless of if I've had a bad week spiritually, or I've done something or said something or hurt my child or my wife in some sort of a way, or I've been rude to someone, whatever, or I've seen or watched or haven't been protecting my eyes like I should have, whatever that may look like, and I got to say it to you, the the power in that is that, okay, it's another reminder yet again that I'm not alone in this fight.
Yeah.
And when we fight alone, we die alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Every time.
Yeah. That's a good call out. And it's also a matter of, I think just that transparency, saying I'm not alone, is we are expecting, aha, caught you,
Right.
right? But in reality is, you too?
And I think the reality is too, when you, again, you have to have the right person.
Right.
You can't just be like, get up on a Sunday and be like, hey, I struggle with, like, no. We're talking about accountability as small circle, one-on-one with a brother, one-on-one with a sister, sister to sister, brother to brother, maybe a very small group like I had growing up in high school. I still remember after a camp session learning something about one of my best friends I had no idea he experienced, right? And I had known him for a number of years up to that point. So that's what accountability does.
Yeah.
It allows you to go a little bit deeper than just surface level. So you have an honesty with the general church, then you have an honesty at a different level with your wife and your family, and then you have an honesty level with your accountability partner. And I think too, this is just it's a further, to answer this question even a layer deeper. My wife has told me, you need to talk to Bill. So women know that men need each other. Yeah. Like, I can't help you with this the way that you need to be helped. Yeah. Go talk to Bill. So thankfully, my wife knows her own limits, right? And I'm not trying to hide, So that's one of those things where, man, you want to talk about the importance of accountability. You want to fail, go at it alone.
And that's so key to have a wife that so understands that dynamic. I mean, we're complementary of each other, but sometimes you need a like-minded one to come along. And
well, women are stronger than men in a lot of ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we can't ignore that fact either.
Very true. A little more difficult of a question.
Sure. I'm an open book today, Bill. An open book.
Well, after this question, you may change your mind.
Okay. Close that book.
What has been one of the most painful criticisms you've received as a pastor, and how did you deal with it?
I'm so good, I don't get any. Still struggling with pride, though. No.
Yeah.
Oh, geez, man, that's a tough one. Criticism?
Yeah. One of the most painful criticisms you've received as a pastor, and how did you respond?
There have been a couple over the years. I mean, I've had... So I taught one time on Paul's teaching where he said, I am the worst of sinners. And I honed in on that. So I started the message by saying, hey, I just want to let you know we are redeemed children of God. We are, those of us who have confessed with our mouth that Jesus is Lord and we truly believe in our heart, God raised him from the dead, we will be saved. Something I'm paraphrasing, but I made sure I shared, we are children of God. However, there's a passage in Scripture where he refers to himself in the first person, and he refers to himself in real time as still being, I am the worst of sinners, not I was. Yeah. And I really harped on that and taught on that. And somebody at the end of it, a gentleman who was kind of popped in from time to time, I think he was from a different area, tried to call me out on that and say, the church needs to hear, they don't need to be told that they're sinners. They need to be taught about grace, and they know they're sinners. And I'm like, there's truth to that. There's truth to that. But I hated the way he said it. He sounded pompous. And it's like, did you even hear the first part of the message that I shared? So that was, it was tough, and it was, I don't think he was trying to criticize me. I think I probably took it too sourly. Then I had a mom once reach out to me because I had given some tickets away to some kids who were part of this thing that we did, and they showed up and they worked hard and they did it. So I had a few tickets, and luckily it was the exact amount of number that I was given, the exact amount of kids that were involved in this program. So during youth group one night, I said, hey, I just want to recognize the kids who did this, and they worked really hard. Here's a ticket to this concert, and I gave out the tickets I had. I got a mom who called me and tried to challenge me on, my son was going to be there, but he was babysitting his family and he was serving God in that way, and he would have been there. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, it was not my intention to hurt the other students. I wanted to recognize them in front of their peers for their hard work and for what they did. And so I had to kind of shut her down. But I get that from time to time. Like, why did you do it this way? You should have done it this way. And it's like, oh, geez, I'm trying to serve these people and they're barking at me or biting me.
For how it was done.
Yeah, those were kind of some moments where you learn that people are going to be people, and you have to have broad shoulders, and you got to be able to respond in grace. And I could have chewed her out, but I did my best to just explain to her the circumstances and, those kinds of things. But yeah, sometimes you get those hard criticisms. You should have done it this way, but you did it that way. So
coming off that question, what would you say to a young man or young men who feel called into ministry but are afraid of the sacrifices that come with it?
it's not sacrifice. You're not sacrificing anything. Jesus sacrificed everything. You're responding in obedience to what he's calling you to do. I wouldn't call it sacrifice. I would call it service. I would call it responsibility. I would even call it a higher calling than the normal average Christian, because that's what Scripture teaches, that we're held to a higher accountability.
Yeah.
I would ask not questions like, sacrifice, or are you ready to sacrifice? I would ask questions: Are you willing to lay your life down in service, and are you willing to grow? Because if you're not willing to serve and you're not willing to grow, pastoral ministries is not for you. That's how I would answer that question.
That's a good answer. Yeah, I would also add in there, if there's anything else that you could see yourself doing, go do that instead. Because if you can see yourself doing that instead, then you're probably not being
probably
called.
not called, yeah.
Yeah.
I was assuming you already passed that point.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, true. How has your definition, and we kind of alluded to this a little bit, but how has your definition of success in ministry changed over the years?
Yeah, so this is going to sound crazy. The culmination, well, not crazy, but the culmination of this, I feel like I just finished learning that lesson.
Really?
And I'm beyond it now. And I think it was my dad's funeral, or my dad's celebration of life service. When my dad passed, he had spent, his adult life in ministry. He died at 67 years old. And you were here. Mm-hmm. There was nowhere to park.
Yeah.
The streets were lined up and down the main road. Cars were parked in the field. It was overflow. You had a few different people. None of us as family shared. We wanted to honor my dad's life by letting other people that he touched, share. So we had like Dale and Kirk and other people who were involved in his life share. And we just worshiped through song. That, coupled with the journey of my dad's passing, struggling with they're fighting terminal bone cancer, I saw how his life, how God touched people through his life. And my dad used to say, ministry is God's riches coming in touch with human needs through the kindness of his servants. And that's what my dad did. So you want to ask me the question again.
How's your definition of success in ministry changed over the years?
It's not about how big your church is. It's not about numbers. It's not about any of that stuff, prestige, whatever. It's not even about longevity in ministry. It's about your faithfulness, no matter what your calling is. And every Christian can do it.
Yeah.
But success is, and it's no different for a person in ministry. It's your faithfulness to God and finishing well.
Yeah. Yeah, whether that's in the corporate world or vocational ministry, or you're running your own business, or you're a blue-collar electrician on the job. I agree 100%.
And it's not about how big, like my dad lived his life in a small New England town. He grew up here. He moved from one small New England town to another, settled in the town that, we're in now. He didn't have any he didn't write a book.
Yeah.
He was never on a Christian television network. He was never a pastor of a mega church.
Yeah.
I mean, he pastored a church of a couple hundred people. For 30 years or whatever, 25 years, he pastored that one church. And before he was here at this church, same thing, 180, 200 people.
Yeah.
There's no major accolades in his life.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I can't tell you how many letters he received, how many calls I got, how many people were asking me about my dad, like throughout his whole journey. I'm like, I didn't even know my dad knew this many people. I don't even know how they got my number. But it was one of those things where that's success in ministry and in life.
Yeah.
So that's how I'd answer that question.
That's a good answer. Yeah. How do you balance, now follow this, how do you balance being a leader, husband, father, servant, without neglecting each of the other roles?
Okay. So I would answer this question kind of the same way I answered one of the previous ones, with you have to serve out of the overflow. And if I am called, which I am because I'm a husband, I've been married almost 22 years, she comes first. And she comes, well, the Lord and then my wife. And my wife comes before my children, and my children come before the ministry. Yep. So when I talk about being like a leader and then balancing all these different areas, it really is about not time management, but priority management.
Which we've talked about.
Which we've talked about on this podcast before. And you have to get really good at that. And I say that because I am a leader in all of those aspects. I'm a leader with my wife. I'm called to be. I'm called to lead her, right? I'm called to lead my children. Mm-hmm. I'm called to lead the ministry here. And so with those responsibilities, I have to learn, okay, how do I prioritize this, right? And then how you lead, there are similarities and there are crossovers, but there also is massive differences. I can't lead the church the same way I lead my wife. I can't lead my kids the same way I lead the church or lead my wife. I can't lead the church the same way I lead. You have to understand what this leadership role requires of me, which again, there's crossover, like love and service is in every single one of those areas, right? Connection before correction is in every one of those areas. So there is some crossover, but there's also things that are not crossed over. I can parent my child because I'm responsible to parent my child. I can't parent your child.
Right.
I can lead them as their youth minister.
Coach.
I can coach them, but I cannot parent them, cannot discipline them, right? So I would say to answer that question, to really understand each role and how you lead in each role and then prioritize each role.
Okay.
Kind of a multifaceted answer there from
No, I love it. That's really good. I'm glad you brought back in the prioritization because, that's a big thing for myself on how to make decisions.
Yeah.
So, and out of the overflow, thank you so much for FOAD for that lesson.
For sure. And what's interesting about that, he says serve out of the overflow. I saw my dad do this his whole life. Yeah. I remember I shared on this podcast before. I remember a Little League game where he couldn't be there. And then after the game, he said, I saw you guys get that. I saw you get that hit. I'm like, what do you mean? You weren't even there. Because I was on the roof because he worked at the shop across the street. So before he went into vocational ministry, he was doing machine work at different shops in the area. He was really good at it. And he went up on the roof during his break and he's watching through binoculars the Little League game because his field is a little bit lower down across the street. And he actually saw me get a hit. So I'm like, man, he even when he can't be there, he still prioritizes his family. So yeah.
What are some warning signs that a Christian man is slowly drifting spiritually that you've seen in ministry?
Sin without shame is his goal for your soul. Satan's goal, the enemy's goal, is for you to be able to do something and not feel bad about it, not feel the conviction of the Holy Spirit. That's a huge indicator you've been sinning for too long. So I would say that's a big one. If you can just do something and then not feel like, why did I do that? Lord, I'm sorry that I did. Why did I do that? If you can just be like, well, he's not going to care about that. Right? That happens all the time, right? Whatever. Oh, that's a problem. So I would say that's another indicator. And then another indicator for me, actually just talking about this with a group of men before, somewhat recently, when the world can't see the difference between you and them, we have a problem. So if you're a Christian man or I'm working with Christian men and it's like, dude, you're doing the same exact things that your coworkers are doing and they're not believers. Or you're doing the same exact thing that the kids in your school are doing and you're supposed to be a follower of Jesus. You're held to a higher standard. Those are those areas I would say, there's some red flags.
Yeah.
Or if I'm counseling you for the same thing for 3 years, which I don't do that for that long. But if I've been counseling you for numerous sessions and there's no growth, that's not my fault. That's your fault. I'm loving on you. I'm giving you the word of God. I'm showing you some different tips and tricks and things to create better habits for yourself, make better choices, to create better habits that'll create a better lifestyle that'll ultimately end in a better character than the one you have right now. But you're responsible for making those choices, not me. Yeah. So if I've been sitting with you for 2 or 3 months and you're still in the same spot, that's a red flag.
What about increased isolation away from other Christians?
Yeah, I would say if you're talking about church ministry as a whole, or you're talking about men or both, good men will be in church, godly men will be in church and engaged. And then you have men who want to be good will be in church when they feel like it. So men who want to be good will be in church when they feel like it. Men who are good will be in church all the time. Men who are godly will be in church and engaged. That's how I kind of gauge it.
I like that. I like that a lot. We should add that to our podcast description.
Episode number 70, whatever.
2 more questions. What do you believe the church is lacking today when it comes to developing Christian men?
What is the church lacking?
If anything. And, not a church, but the church.
This is tough. I would say, I don't know if it's what the church is lacking or if it's just the engagement that we have with one another as men inside the church. I don't know if it's one of those things where it's not something a program is going to fix. It's not something like, we're lacking more men's breakfasts or we're lacking more, because there's plenty of opportunity for men to be engaged in most churches.
But they don't.
But they don't engage. Yeah. So I don't think it's a fair question.
Okay.
Because I think a lot of I'll say this for the churches I know.
Right.
There's a lot of churches that actually have programs for these men to jump into. There's Bible studies, but you can only coach someone or pastor someone or counsel someone to the level of honesty that they give you. So if they're there, a couple times a month at the weekly thing and they're saying, please pray for my, I got to go to my, mechanic and get my truck fixed. Okay, dude, nobody cares about the alternator in your truck, man. We're here to talk about how you're doing spiritually. You know what I'm saying? There's frustrations there from pastors who, of course, we care about your truck, but we care about you and your soul.
Yeah.
So that really takes, I think it's far too long where we say, hey, what's wrong with the church or what can we do better as a church to get men to engage? Men just need to engage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, period, including me and you.
Yeah.
But if your church does lack a good, offering of things that men can be involved in, and I would dare say this, and I'm not the first one to say this, and this is just, hear me out on this. Sunday morning services, and this, again, I'm just saying this because I've heard it and it piqued my interest. It's not really the most manly thing you can do. Meaning, you're coming and you're sitting there and you're listening, you're standing and you're worshiping, and especially if you're not a dude who loves music or who can sing, it's kind of awkward. You got to get past all that as a man, right? And know that you're there for growth spiritually. But it's kind of flowery a lot of times, emotional songs and raising hands and kumbayas, my Lord. And the dude's like, is there like a lawn I can mow? Is there like a shed I can build for the church? Like, can I build some picnic tables for the yard over here? Like, give me something to do. Like, so that is probably maybe one thing. I know I'm not here at Jaffrey because we got plenty of work days.
We do.
And Jay sends those around on the regular.
Yeah.
So again, that's just how I would twofold answer that question. It's on men to engage, not necessarily the church to have a program for every single dude's interests. So
I also find that if one man starts to be transparent, that makes other men feel safe to be transparent.
Yep.
And not every man will get to that point.
So you can answer your own question, Bill, by saying maybe if the church does lead it, it needs to start with the leadership.
Absolutely.
Leadership needs to exemplify what men need to do.
Well, the law of the lid from John Maxwell. You can't lead people past your level of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Go one more?
Last one.
All right, let's do it.
If you could sit down with your younger self before entering ministry, what advice would you give you?
Be more honest with your accountability. That's it. No joking around.
Just get right to it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Is it because you've learned that's been a safe place or because it's been transforming or?
Both.
Really?
Both. Yep. There's when you isolate spiritually, there's no such thing as like stagnant, lukewarm. Jesus answered that when he was here. Lukewarm, he'll spit you out of his mouth. Why? Because you just deny him outright or grow with him. And I feel like Christian men who stagnant or they're not honest about growing, they're not really engaged in growing, you're going to be stagnant. And I've been stagnant multiple times. So if I was my younger self or if you were my younger self, I'd say, dude, Jared, just talk about the hard stuff right now and don't stop talking about it. And I probably would have saved myself some seasons of shame.
That's such a good answer. That's a good answer. Well, thanks for watching. I hope you found this valuable. I hope some of these answers God used to speak to you. Well, if you want to share your story of your growth, your journey as a Christian man, please drop us a comment. Otherwise, like, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.